7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is a sailing story about three brothers, Tripp, Chris, and Trevor Burd. You might know Tripp and Chris already. In 2015, they sailed together in the first ever race to Alaska in a 22-foot beach catamaran. The winners get $10,000. Second place, a set of steak knives. We made a movie about the 2015 race. Just search for Our Race to Alaska on YouTube.
Beautiful sunset.
If you enjoy it, throw us a like. Or better yet, subscribe to our channel and leave a thoughtful comment. Aw, thanks. Wait, no, the Earth isn't flat. Anyway, back to the story. Tripp and Chris learned a lot from their first race. Like it's hard to sleep outside, having it down below would have been nice, and rowing a sailboat sucks. If you want to win the race to Alaska, you can't ever stop. Even though the 2015 race didn't go entirely to plan, it was an amazing experience that they would remember forever. The only downside was that Trevor couldn't come. It would have been pretty darn cool to have all the Burd brothers together. So 2 years later, when some curveballs in life brought all three brothers together, they decided not to let the opportunity pass them by. Team Freebird was back and better than ever. At this time, they would use a 28-foot trimaran, complete with the cabin. For the light wind, they borrowed a pedal drive and jerry-rigged it to the stern.
Testing the pedal drive. What do you think?
So far, so good. We're moving forward.
1.4 knots. We're moving into the wind. Surprising. Oh, now it's 1.3.
Could have been training.
This is exhausting. This is not sailboat racing.
I don't know if you can see that. We're going 3.8 knots right now. 4.3, cruising along.
It wasn't perfect, but it sure beat rowing. Realizing they might be stuck at sea for weeks, preparations had to be made, like getting safety gear and clothing, and lots of food.
So Chris, you want to walk us through the front of the boat here?
Yeah, absolutely. So up in our lovely suite up forward here, basically we have our toolkit under here and our battery. Hopefully we don't ever need to open this up. And what I would say is probably the part I'm most excited about, our little downstairs bunk area / storage. Get ready for a little nap here. Yeah, this is a huge upgrade from last time. I think, cold is gonna be relative, but hopefully it's a little less cold. Hopefully we can keep it dry. I think that's gonna be a really, really important thing. If we're not dry down here, it's out of the wind a little bit, but it's gonna be gross.
With their boat full of food and some cameras to self-document their adventure, it was time to head to the starting line.
How you feeling?
We are 5 minutes to the start. I'm already cold and hungry.
The croissants were too warm.
Yeah.
It was tragic. The butter melted too quickly.
Yeah, not quite flaky enough.
The first leg of the race to Alaska, a 50-mile sprint from Port Townsend to Victoria, is a qualifier to weed out the unprepared. It doesn't count towards your final finish, but if you can't complete it, you're not allowed to continue. The breeze was non-existent and the rowers dominated the day. The Burd brothers put their pedal drive to the test and managed to pull into Victoria in 5th out of 49 teams. The main event covers 700 miles from Victoria to Ketchikan, with 2 mandatory checkpoints through Seymour Narrows. We'll talk about that place later, and Bella Bella, a town that's only accessible by boat or seaplane. Despite the dangers surrounding the route, team spirits were high, especially after an uplifting pep talk from the local authorities.
So I'm Captain Susan Pickrell from Joint Rescue Coordination Center. I'm here talking to all the skippers at the Race to Alaska skippers meeting, and just trying to give them a little dose of reality of what the race is going to be like for them, and hopefully they won't need our services. But the truth is, after yesterday there was 9 cases and quite a few vessels needed our assistance. So just hoping to give them some pointers today that they're in for a difficult race, long distances, no resources. They're going to have to be self-sufficient and really going to have to work the wind and tide to their advantage.
Gnarly weather, strong tides, little opportunity for rescue. You might think to yourself, who the hell would do this?
3, 2, 1.
These people.
I think our start went a lot better than last time. A little slow getting off the dock, but I think we're all a little more relaxed than our last one. Last time it felt like we were going off to a battleground. This time we're going out racing, hopefully. And we got out of there. It was fun finally being able to be a little more effective on the pedal drive, pass some boats on the way out, get some sails up, and here we go to Alaska. We're about an hour out of the start. Gorgeous conditions, and plugging away here.
What are you looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to? More wind? I don't know, when's lunch?
A lot of people ask how we make dinner underway. What do we eat? We are eating Hawaiian style chicken and rice, maybe some peanut butter crackers, beef jerky, all sorts of stuff. This is how we do it. This is our home.
The first day out of Victoria brought light winds and sunny skies, allowing the rowboats, peddlers, and even a stand-up paddleboarder in the fleet to break out with an early lead. The conditions were beautiful, but as any sailor knows, too little wind can be pretty frustrating, especially if you have to ride a stationary bike just to maintain forward speed.
So we've been pedaling for most of the day, but finally it looks like you kind of see some big line of dark clouds, which is supposedly a pretty big blow coming. So we've got some smaller sails ready to go. It's probably going to be dark and wet and cold and windy. Hopefully nothing too out of control, but we'll take it as it comes. The forecast looks reasonable, so nothing too crazy, but definitely going to be windy. Let's fly.
Gorgeous. You know what? It's beautiful out here.
How did today go so far?
I think my leg's going to be a lot stronger at the end of the race than at the beginning, so that's good. Looking on the bright side. Got Lance down here doing his best, and charging along.
All right, it's about 3:30 in the morning, blasting along upwind in 20-ish knots. It is unquestionably, we're going against the waves right now. It is unquestionably the most violent I've ever had down below on a boat with steep waves, and trying to sleep it is a lost cause. We're getting tossed around, but making good headway at least right now.
It's been an exciting 24 hours. We had some pretty tough conditions the last maybe 10 hours, but now it's mellowed out and going upwind, just cruising, taking the time to dry everything out. Despite being pretty buttoned up, this boat gets really wet. So we're trying to keep everything neat and organized since we're only a day in. Trevor just was out on the Ama fixing a bent rudder pin. It's kind of funny, this boat, it's like a little house or a little city. Everything that we need to repair ourselves is here. Where the little boat we had, we used to stop and repair and pull up on shore. This thing we can kind of fix things as we go. And there's enough people and enough tools on board to keep going without hiccups, except for something major. So still charging ahead. I think we got a little bit of a lead on the competition, but nothing to rest on yet. So we're still charging up to see more narrows. We'll see if we make our tide gate.
One of many unique aspects of this race are the tide gates. The inside passage between Vancouver Island and the mainland gets narrower and narrower the farther north you go. In its most constricted region, the wind and tide are accelerated through, creating incredibly strong winds and currents even when the weather is nice. Tidal currents here can exceed 15 knots. Tell most sailors that, and they won't believe you, but it's true. It's like trying to navigate through a raging river, and without an engine, it's impossible to make headway against it. This means that passing through the straits is only possible at certain times in the tidal cycle, creating a window of opportunity often referred to as a tide gate. Tripp, Chris, and Trevor had taken a small lead over the rest of the fleet, and if they pushed hard, they might pass through the straits right as the tide switches, closing the gate for over 6 hours and forcing their opponents in pursuit to stop.
Yeah, it has been a frustrating day. Basically, after getting beat up pretty good this morning, going upwind, it kind of lightened off, and then for the last, lot of hours, we've been basically floating and just barely drifting along and getting eaten by flies. And at the same time, wind is filled in from the south, where everyone that we had pulled away from pretty good last night by working hard is now catching up very quickly. So they're, depending on what the wind does, they may be here any moment.
Making or missing the tide gate can come down to the minute, and more importantly, if they made it and the competitors close behind couldn't, their lead would balloon over 100 nautical miles, leaving them in a controlling position for the remainder of the race. They pushed the boat to its limit and sprinted up the coast towards Seymour Narrows, hoping for the wind and tide to come together in their advantage. Late at night, they made it through the Narrows just in time to make the tide gate. But they weren't the only ones that did.
That's not awkward.
Tripp, what was your favorite part of the night? So last night was our transit through Seymour Narrows, which is traditionally one of the super gnarly spots on the race course. We had probably 12 knots of current, but zero wind. It's one of the places where last time we did this race, we got thrashed. It was one of the worst, toughest days of sailing we've had. Where last night, 1 in the morning, no wind, but with 12 knots of current, we're tacking through 30 degrees, cranking uphill. In the middle of all that, we hear some breaking waves. We assume it's crazy current. There's whirlpools and everything. And all of a sudden, a pod of porpoises are following us through this narrow gap. Maybe 30 porpoises are swimming with us for 20 minutes as we transit this little shot. And I don't know, it's amazing. You wouldn't believe it if someone told you, but it's stuff like that. It's the reason why we do this race.
With 2 teams close behind, they've reached the end of the straits and sailed into open water. The wind was relatively light and variable, and with boat-breaking obstacles popping up around them, the prospect of losing their lead, or worse yet, breaking the boat, grew like the slime lining their mildewed dry suits.
No wind, sun's up, and we've come across 10,000 logs like these. Gives an idea of what's out here and what disappears at night. At least you hope. How many layers are you putting on?
2 on top, 2 on the bottom. All of which are soaked. This is way worse than just being wet. Wet you can deal with, but it's just the way soaked into everything. It's like all of our clothes have this like pudding rubbed all into them. It's like sticky, wet. Ugh. Well, it's about 10 o'clock on Tuesday night, and as you can see, it is totally glassy out there. Which is funny because tonight it's supposed to blow maybe 20 knots, 30 knots, 40 knots later, it's gonna get pretty big, pretty nasty, pretty quick. So right now we're just trying to make as much progress as we can, and getting ready for the worst when it happens. You know, figuring out how we're gonna get everything prepped, and you know how we're gonna stuff Tripp to the back corner of the boat. You know, make sure you keep the bow out of the water, and go from there. What are you working on, Chris? I'm making a little Cincinnati-style chili. Ooh, I don't know if it's for dinner or breakfast or what. It doesn't really matter. It's cold and this is warm.
As they crept north, the forecast deteriorated. Cold temperatures, rain, and moody winds, sometimes barely a breath, then maybe a gale. The final days of the race looked to be wet, cold, and challenging.
Looks nautical out here.
We're sailing! We're sailing!
Where are we?
It's still wet and the dry seat is still full of pudding.
We went out and around and came back out into the ocean, expecting to find better wind than on the inside lanes, and we found it.
Heavy winds and seas forced them to reef their sails for safety. If they were to bury one of the hulls into a wave, it could lead to a disaster. As is life racing a multi-hull, speed comes at a cost.
They're a little more than we expected on this one. These waves are ridiculous. An adventure, right? We're back off the gnarliness that we had before with the main down and the little baby scrap jib up. And we're finally moving again. Got the big spinnaker, got the full main. So much nicer, really just making progress towards the target. We figure we've got about 180 miles to go or so. How much more fun are you having now, Tripp?
Oh my god. It got pretty heavy for a while. Now we got flat water and 18 knots. Ugh. Game changer.
Chris, is that what you'd call it, pretty heavy? Something like that. Something like that, all right.
Hey, look, there's some,
Ooh, we got some whales. Oh, yeah.
Good morning from the kitchen on the Freebird yacht. And thank you to Tim and Juliet. JJ Hapgood set us up with all sorts of Vermont stuff. It's been maple syrup and chocolate for the last 4 breakfasts. This is our little stove setup. It's a good day.
On the home stretch of the race, Big Broderna, a local team in a 31-foot trimaran, made a final push and barely took the lead. The two teams tacked back and forth, searching for any advantage they could find, match racing up Nichols Passage into Ketchikan. The stage was set for what would be the most dramatic finish in R2AK history. After nearly 700 miles of racing, the two teams were so close they could yell to one another.
Just what you expected, more rowing. Oh yeah!
The Burd brothers managed to find a tiny passing lane and clung to it as the wind died and filled from behind. With Broderna closing in with their spinnaker filled, they paddled hard, one last push to the finish line.
We are there yet! It's Alaska!
It had been a little over 4 days since leaving Victoria. Tripp, Chris, and Trevor arrived first to Ketchikan, winning the 2017 Race to Alaska.
Great, thank you.
Second place and new owners of the legendary R2AK steak knives was Big Broderna, finishing only 6 minutes later. It was a race to the very finish, the kind of experience every sailor dreams of, or has nightmares about, depending on which boat you're on.
The last 12 hours were way stretchier than I thought they needed to be.
So tell me about this last stretch of the race. What happened here?
Sure. So maybe 50 miles out, we started trading tacks with these guys, and they got ahead of us. And finally, maybe 10, 15 miles ago, we passed them. Thought we were good to go, racing in, and then all of a sudden we turned around and they're on their bikes and catching up to us super quick. So we had a battle to get in for the finish. Here we go.
And when I talked to you guys out there, you were like, nope, not in the bag yet, not in the bag yet, not in the bag yet. What made you think that? Were you guys just joking around, or was that actually seriously?
They were closing on us fast. I think all along there was lots of trading around of who was in the lead, and that's why this race is so cool.
Every once in a while we get cell signal, so we do check the tracker when we get cell signal, and we could see that they're ahead of us. So and we just had a hunch that we were catching them. We were going really, really hard, stuffing all 3 amas into the waves. So that's when you're going so fast and you hit the back of a wave that you actually stuff the boat. And if you stuff the boat hard enough, you can flip over. And doing that in the middle of Dixon Entrance, 50 miles offshore is not a good thing. So that's in the back of your mind. You make sure your dry suit's really zipped up and you got your life preservers on and your personal EPIRB, and you hope if you stuff it and flip it that you can crawl back on the upside down shell and somebody will come rescue you. I mean, I like to think we weren't totally risking our lives, but it was on the edge a little bit sometimes.
This is ridiculous. We've been racing 700 miles and, we had a restart 5 miles away. Yeah, this is the coolest race in sailing.
Winning the race to Alaska had been in their minds since 2015. The most important goal, and the reason why they were really there, was to sail together. And because they had opted to race a big boat, their adventure was only halfway done. They still had to sail back home. Only now they could take their time and soak in what some consider to be the most beautiful waters in the world. Sailing with those you love most is a special experience that you can only really understand by doing it. Tripp, Trevor, and Chris had been sailing their whole lives, but this race had been different. On the outside, and maybe even throughout this film, it may have seemed that they had been there for the glory, to win and be champions. But all along, there had been a different reason.
Pretty spectacular place to be, sailing home, and it's Father's Day, which I guess for us this is the first, because a few weeks before the start of the race, our dad passed away. Yeah, been a tough few months at the Burd household, but this is something that he would be so proud and excited to be following right now. So it's, as fitting as it can be that we're out here as a family doing something we all love. That's pretty meaningful for us right now, and although we don't talk about it that often, it's something that we wouldn't want to be anywhere else or replaced with anything else right now.
A few weeks before the race began, Tripp, Chris, and Trevor's father, Chuck Burd, died of cancer. In his last few months, his 3 sons had come together to be with him and each other, and during that time decided that they would sail together in the race to Alaska and try to win it for their dad. And that's exactly what they did.